Thank you, Liza, for being here, and everyone on Zoom and who's watching later. We are recording this, so Liza, you can go back and watch it. We'll send it to you as well. But we are in March, which is so crazy, but it is Empowerment and Confidence Month, which is so perfect considering it's Women's History Month and just us being a female-focused workspace. So we're excited to have Laura here today to talk about empowerment in yourself and in your business. She is a small business entrepreneur coach, as well as many other things that she will touch on. But thank you so much for being here, and the floor is all yours.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Well, hey, everybody out there in Zoom land. Thanks for joining us, and thank you for joining us live here in St. Louis. We've just got done talking about how gorgeous it is, the weather here, and just found out Denver's getting snow. God bless you all. Spring is coming, and that empowers me, knowing that the good weather's coming. So today, we're going to talk a little bit about empowerment, confidence, and actually, there's going to be a spoiler alert because I'm going to talk a little bit about what's beyond empowerment, and a lot of people kind of forget that. So when I talk about empowerment, we're going to really dig a little bit deeper than what most people think about when I think about empowerment. But first, let's talk about a little bit about my background. You can find this, a lot of this on my, I'll share my LinkedIn profile a little bit later. You can click on that, connect with me, you get a lot of this information. But I feel like before I do any speaking, I want people to know kind of who I am and where I kind of come from. Now, those of you in Denver, if you can't see this, I'm going to just read it really quickly. I've been married to my husband for 26 years. We have a blended family of 5 grown children. Our last one's getting married in September. We have 5, and I had to use the adjective, 5 beautiful grandchildren. And interestingly, I do a lot of work with the local Humane Society and Stray Rescue of St. Louis. I started replacing my adult children with animals. So every time one of them would fly out of the nest, I would replace it with a fur baby. Hi, thanks for joining us. So yeah, I have 5 fur babies at home. I have a 12-year teaching career. I taught special needs kids in the public school system. Then I jumped into a sales career, which then accumulated into 30 years in direct sales. I had a big team from Maine to California. I still have a team. Before, I'm going to say pre-COVID, we were doing about $4.7 million annually, and that was just my team. I'm also, to a surprise to many, a U.S. Army veteran. I'll kind of share that story in a little bit and how I got involved in that. I'm also a board member for Feed My People here in St. Louis. I decided my last quarter century of my life was going to be a journey of giving back. So I'm super involved in volunteerism and doing the things that I'm passionate about. I was also recently asked to be a mentor because I am a veteran in the Veterans Treatment Court in Madison County, Illinois, where I meet with female veterans specifically who are dealing with PTSD or drug addiction, and they've gotten themselves into trouble, and I'm kind of a life coach for them, and that's all, again, volunteerism, and I've really been enjoying connecting with female veterans that need that connection. I'm also a John Maxwell certified coach. I love his message. I love all of his trainings. And then about 2 years ago, right when COVID was kind of kicking into gear, I decided to found a company that was specifically geared towards helping women entrepreneurs. Because I have so many years of experience with dealing with women entrepreneurs, I decided I'm going to take this to the next level. So I founded Laura Klein Group. I do a lot of coaching. I do a lot of strategic planning. I work with anybody, and actually a couple of men. When they hire me, I don't mind any gender difference, but primarily my focus has always been female business owners. So I wanted to start off, I find these words to be quite ugly, but we have to talk about it because we need to know what is the opposite of empowerment. And I use these words because I've experienced these words, and probably for our audience, you may have sometime in your life. Some of the adjectives that I came up with were unsettling, crippling, deflating, frustrating, rattling, depriving, restricting, blocking, prohibiting, disallowing, refusing, opposing, restraining, denying, trapping, and the list goes on. So what I'm going to ask you to do today is kind of interact. You can just take notes or make mental notes. But how do these words make you feel? When I see those on the screen, I cringe. I think, oh my gosh, I never want to feel that way. But the fact of the matter is, I have. I won't go through each of the periods in my life because I could probably talk for 3 days, but I remember these specific times in my life where I felt completely disempowered. I say that because I want you to know that my message today comes from experiencing these things, and then how do you dig out? How do you get back to having empowerment? I remember when my parents sent me to a private high school in Illinois. All of my friends went to a different high school, and I felt completely disempowered because I remember thinking, I have a class size of 15 at this small little grade school that I went to, and I'm being thrown into a high school with, thousands. So that was a moment. I didn't know it was disempowerment. When you're only 15 years old, you don't know what disempowerment is. But that, looking back, I realized, oh my gosh, how did I even get through that? And I'll talk a little bit later. I joined the Army Reserves when I was newly married. My ex-husband had talked me into getting involved. Well, let's just face it, it's a male-dominated field. I come in, I'm a female, and it just opened my eyes to all the obstacles that females can run into when you're in that male-dominated environment. I also served active duty in Saudi Arabia during the Desert Storm conflict. I actually just wrote a chapter in a book about a year ago about my experiences. And I have to tell you, disempowerment. When you go into a war zone, no matter how much training you have, that is when you can really dip into some really deep places of disempowerment. I'm going to kind of give you a scale a little bit later. You train and you think, I know how to do this. Get over there. Here's the funny part of that story. We didn't even do a mission that we've been training on for years. We were given a completely different mission. We oversaw a prisoner of war refugee camp. We had 20,000 prisoners and refugees. We never trained on that. So that can also lead to a feeling of disempowerment. What are we doing? How do I do this? We didn't train on this. So again, how do you get through that? I also went through a divorce when I came back from Desert Storm. When you sit on a sand dune and you're providing security and you're by yourself, you have a lot of time to gain clarity. And it was at that point that I became empowered because I knew that I was in a bad marriage, came home, made the decision, divorced, became a single mother. And that was actually not necessarily disempowerment, but that's when I realized I have control and I can make choices. The first time I ever spoke on a national stage, I think there were like 8,000 people in the audience. And I remember sitting in my hotel room going, what am I doing? Why in the world have I put myself in that predicament to get out there? Do I have enough knowledge? Why did they pick me? What am I doing? And that was probably 25 years ago. Looking back, I felt very disempowered, thinking, I sat in the hotel room just thinking, I'm going to have to cancel. I'm going to have to tell them I can't do it. And then once I got out there, the empowerment kicked in. But I'm going to give you a few tips on how to make that transition when you get into a situation where you feel disempowered. And finally, after about 20 years with one sales company, I did make a career change. That can be either empowering or disempowering. So the question I have today is, what time in your life have you felt disempowered? We all go through it. The question is, how do we get through it and get to where we want to be? I use this picture because I think it's a really great reminder. Showing up is the best version of, or showing up as the best version of yourself is really true empowerment. I think it goes back to recharging yourself, especially women today. We just don't always take the time to do that. I just read an article actually on electric cars and where we're going. By 2030, which is, my goodness, only 8 years away, 60 to 70% of all car sales are going to have to go all electric in order to, by 2050, everyone will be driving an electric car. And I thought to myself, my gosh, that's a really long transition. I mean, we're talking over 28 years to get to the point where our country is driving electric cars. And I bring that up because empowerment doesn't happen overnight. Just like success, it's not a destination, it's a journey. And so here I am talking today at the age of 59. I could talk all day long about empowerment because I went through many years of having situations of feeling less than empowered. So I always ask women, especially, how do you recharge yourself every day? Are you willing to be in for the long haul? Because you don't wake up one day and go, I can conquer the world. I'm completely empowered. It is a process and it does take time. All right, what is empowerment? Empowerment is the ability to prioritize self-care Love yourself first, and then you can serve others better. Being the mom of 5 children, I can tell you firsthand that probably self-care was on the bottom of my list. And as women in the 50s, women were stay-at-home moms. Now we've been thrown into the workforce by choice, sometimes not by choice. And these are areas that women sometimes we kind of let go. And there's 4 areas of self-care, and I want you today to identify what areas you may need to focus on. We, of course, have the physical area of self-care, which includes sleep, stretching, walking, physical release, yoga, healthy food, rest. Then we have emotional, which is stress management, emotional maturity, forgiveness, compassion, and kindness. Now, throughout this presentation, I will share some stories, and it's, a time to be vulnerable because I love to share real life stories. I'm going to talk a little bit about forgiveness. In my very first sales company, there was a young lady. She was not on my team, but she was within the company that I was working. And many people came to me and said, she is getting where she's going because of unethical practices. So I was bothered by that because I was always taught to be ethical and work hard for everything that I had. And I went to the corporate office and I talked to them about what I'd heard and what she was doing. And they basically turned their cheek and said, it doesn't matter how she's getting the results. We can't prove that, that she's being unethical. And I'll never forget, I harbored that. And I thought, you know what? I don't know if I can get past that. Every meeting I had to see her, I knew what she was doing. It was really hard to be in the same room knowing that she wasn't practicing ethically. So probably about 3 years in, I decided one day, I gotta let it go because it's literally dragging me down knowing what she was doing. And I called her up. I had a conversation with her and I realized her denying what she was doing, I had to be okay with that. I had to let it go. Was putting my energy there really doing anything for me? All it was doing was literally dragging me down. So I think forgiveness is a huge part of empowering ourselves. And I wanted to share that story because to this day, I can talk to her and it doesn't bother me. I had to let it go. Social is another one. I have a funny story about boundaries. Social will include setting boundaries, having those very important support systems around us. Positive social media, huge. We can see that 1 in 5 Americans deal with a mental condition. That has increased as a result of social media and also experiencing COVID the last 2 years. Communication, time together, and asking for help. Here's my funny story about boundaries. Recently, the commander of Post 199 in Edwardsville, the American Legion, we found out I was a veteran and I received a phone call. He's probably in his 70s, I love older people. And he called me up and he said, I did not know you were a veteran. I go, I know, I surprise a lot of people. I am a veteran. And he said, I would love to get you involved in helping us run our bingos. Now we're getting back, COVID is over. He goes, is there any chance that you would like to come and help sell tickets? And I said, sure, when is it? He said, well, it's every Monday night. He goes, I'd love to help you work up to become a bingo caller. Like I was going to work up through the chain, And I said, oh my gosh, I can't imagine. That would be a wonderful opportunity. I said, however, I can't commit to every Monday night. I have a really crazy busy life, but I can't say no because I love what you're doing. I will come out and sell tickets and hopefully work my way up to being a bingo caller. So I was able to set the boundaries. The old Laura Klein probably would have said, sure, Monday night, let me put it in there every Monday night. It's okay to say no. It's okay to set boundaries. It's okay to still give of yourself. The key is not to empty your cup, which we're going to talk about in a minute. And the fourth one is spiritual. Time alone, meditation, yoga, connection, nature, journaling, which we're going to talk about a little bit later too, and just having that sacred space. Now, I think the older I get, the more important spirituality becomes for me, because I can tell you that most people get so wrapped up in life that these are the 4 areas that are most neglected. So the question today is, what area of self-care do you need to focus on? So look at that, remember that, and kind of think about where maybe you fit in that. So I wanted to talk to, I just made this post on LinkedIn actually about some of the myths about self-care. Honestly, my audience is always women, but this could work for men as well, right? So a lot of times people say, well, self-care is an indulgence. I mean, I feel bad going and getting that massage, but honestly, meaningful self-care will actually help you make those mindful changes in patterns of thoughts and behaviors. And when you don't make those mindful changes, you're probably going to feel less disempowered. Self-care is selfish. I have a lot of friends that tell me, I feel so bad when I could be doing this for my kids, or I need to be doing this. I just don't have the time or feel like I should take the time to take care of myself. Recently had a girlfriend, she's going through some rough times. She's actually caring for her husband who's very ill. And she treated herself to a massage. She sounded like a new person. I'm on the phone with her and I said, that massage did you good. She said, it was amazing. And I said, why don't you think about doing it every week? She was, every week, I could never do that. I said, yes, you can. So 3 days later, I get on the phone with her and she's having a really bad day. And I said, so self-care is not a one-time experience. And that's what she was using, that one-time massage. She thought that was just going to solve everything. Within 3 days, she was already disempowered and having a really, really rough day taking care of her husband. So it's an ongoing practice. We have to let it be okay to take time. And if it means going out and getting a massage once a week, or finding the sacred space in your home to read a good book with no interruption, then that's what we should be doing. Self-care is time consuming. I meet especially so many women that say, I just don't have the time to take out that huge chunk in my day. When you think about how many days or how many hours are in a day, if it means, one woman I met formed the 5 a.m. club. She gets up every day at 5 a.m. just in order to have self-care. She finds a quiet space in her house, reads a good book. Normally she gets up at 6 with her kids, and she goes, just adding that 1 hour a day has made a huge difference as far as my ability for self-care. So have you ever bought into these myths? I have. For me, it was always time, but now no more. I always make time for that. And finally, the last screen on empowerment is possessing the confidence needed to grow to the next level. The biggest mystery or myth out there about empowerment is that's the pinnacle. And we're going to talk about what's beyond empowerment. But here are 8 ways that I have found to boost confidence. I always tell people to visualize your confidence. I look back 25 years ago when I was in the hotel room thinking, I got to go out there in front of 8,000 people. What the heck was I thinking? I literally went in the bathroom, put on my business suit, gave my speech right in front of that mirror, felt totally better because I had that visualization. Filling your life with motivation. I always share books that I'm currently reading. If you have a favorite podcast, look it up. You could just type in searches on certain topics. I'll be sharing these in just a bit, but I always start my day with something positive to read. And I always end my night with something positive, even if I am so tired and if I read a paragraph. That is so important to fill your brain with motivation. Setting boundaries, we already talked about, and creating and embodying an alter ego. You know, what is an alter ego and who do you want it to be? It doesn't have to be someone that's alive. You can literally sit down and go, who do I want to be? For me personally, I want to be a person that has freedom, flexibility. Income is of course important, but to me, what's more important, you just can't put a price tag on freedom and flexibility. And that is how I live my life. Giving back, someone that has time to give back. That's my alter ego. I don't define success anymore by income like I did in my early years. I always defined it as, oh my gosh, I've reached my goal on income for a certain year or a decade, and now I don't look at it that way. I always strive to give back, and we'll talk a little bit later about that as well. Creating a power playlist. I don't know about you, when I clean my house, I turn on the music, or I listen to a podcast, something that's giving me the energy needed to move forward. And then I'm a John Maxwell certified coach. One of the things that John Maxwell trains on, and I love this, is focusing on your strengths. Anybody watch The Voice or American Idol? I love that. I'm so impressed by the way that these women and men can sing. And you know what? God didn't give me that talent. I've never been able to sing. It wouldn't matter if I spent $1,000 a week on voice lessons. That's not my God-given talent. My God-given talent has always been to training, gift of gab, all those things that kind of go with a career in sales. But he says the biggest mistake people make is focusing on their weaknesses. If you've ever sat in on a employee getting interviewed, or going through someone who is getting kind of going through their every once a year, I can't even think of the word, anyway, where they sit down and say, here's what we see, you have a list of weaknesses and you need to work on this, this, and this. Probably the biggest mistake ever is to focus on those weaknesses, because people are only going to be able to work to a certain level. When you focus on your strengths and you embellish those, that's where you're going to go far, far, far. Smiling more and dressing the part, I think those are pretty obvious, which is important. Here's a great visual. Imagine that we're this cup on the top, and for those of you on Zoom, you may not be able to see that visual, but these are just a bunch of stacked cups, and currently they're empty. If you can imagine you being the top cup, this is what true empowerment is. It is when you fill your cup in overabundance. And I want you to imagine water. If I was to fill this top cup with water and only filled it just maybe halfway, my ability to empower others is very limited. I've allowed myself to maybe even sometimes get to the point of being what I call a people pleaser. I have a friend that kind of does that. And the problem with being a people pleaser is you morph into someone that you're really not. And you try to do things so that others will like you. And a people pleaser never has a full cup. Being yourself, staying in your lane, doing the things that you do well allows you to have a cup that's overflowing. And imagine the visual. If your cup is overflowing, where is it going into? The next cup. Then we spread this empowerment with women because we've learned to continue to overflow. Now, the other person I always like to talk about, and that's in the book I just got done reading, is Purpose Driven Life. Great book if you want some motivation and guidance on where your life's going. One of the things he talks about is the flip side of the people pleaser would be that person that unfortunately is envious or jealous. They tend to search out people that they want to be like, and that will also deplete your cup. So I always ask people, do you see yourself being a person of envy? Do you see yourself maybe being a party pleaser? If your cup is empty, you may just be spreading yourself too thin. I always told my husband, I am best with my children when I have an overabundance and I'm feeling great and I'm supercharged and I have the energy to be able to relate to my kids and other women in my sales profession. So the question is your cup empty, half full, full, or overflowing? The goal would be to have a cup that is overflowing. And we do that through empowerment. So I wanted to talk about this story. This was shared. Actually, I love Joel Osteen. I always want to listen to his podcast as well. He had shared this recently. I thought, oh my gosh, this is perfect. You know, destiny isn't a matter of choice. Or I'm sorry, it's not a matter of chance. It is a matter of choice. And I love this story about this older Cherokee Indian who was having a conversation with his grandson. And he was trying to teach his grandson that each person has two wolves within their soul. And these wolves are in a constant battle. And one wolf represents evil, anger, jealousy, pride, laziness. The other wolf is joy, happiness, success, humility, love, kindness, self-control. The little boy thought about it after his grandfather had kind of told him about these two wolves and how they battle inside of us. And very innocently, the grandson said, you know what, grandfather, thank you for that. However, who ends up winning? Which wolf is the winner? And he simply replied, the wolf that wins is the one that you feed. And that really is about mindset for all of us. When you feed the wolf that is about peace, joy, kindness, humility, love, and self-control, then that's what we get back. It's about feeding the right thing and then having the right mindset. I also love to talk about obstacles and challenges because that is what I've seen hold people back. We know that an obstacle is anything that gets in our way and stops and slows our progress. We also know that these specific things are the ones that end up being our obstacle. Race, for me, gender in the military, ethnicity, religion, geography, access to healthcare, physical and mental health, family, safety, education. I bring those up because I want people to identify the one thing that might be holding someone back. Once you identify it, once I realized that gender was an issue, and if you know anything about Saudi Arabia, it wasn't just me being in the military, it was the fact that that country does not really accept women in leadership positions. That was very clear to me. And I was a lieutenant in the Army, so that was definitely an obstacle as far as being a female lieutenant in the Army in a country that does not respect women. That was very interesting. And that was an obstacle that I had to overcome. I wanted to kind of bring up this word because I love to talk about self-efficacy. Why is it that some people can get through an obstacle and other people can't? If I had you write down the name of someone that you think, gosh, it doesn't seem like anything ever brings her down. Why is she able to get through just any obstacle? And then you may have a friend, or you may be relating it to yourself. You may be thinking, you know what? It just seems like I always hit a roadblock and I can't get past that. Well, really, it's all about self-efficacy. I'm going to give you a visual. It is March Madness, by the way, and I do love sports. So I'm going to use the basketball example. Let's say that I hand you a basketball and I let you stand on a ladder and there's the basketball hoop. And I say, hey, what do you think your chances are standing on that ladder and you're 2 inches from the basket? What are your chances of throwing that basketball inside that hoop? On a scale of 0 to 10, you'd probably go, what's a 10? I'm like 2 inches from the basket, right? That is really what self-efficacy is. It's a fancy term for believing or perceived capabilities. We know what we can do based on prior performance. We know what we're capable of. So this is where our mind gets wrapped around, because if I moved you out to the free throw line and asked you, what would your self-efficacy be? Do you see yourself making how many baskets from that line? Your number is going to go down. You're going to say, I want to give myself a 5. I don't see myself making too many baskets. If I move you out to the half court and say, now, what are your chances of hitting that basket? You're going to say, oh boy, probably a big fat 0. Because I, A, don't play basketball. B, it's the first time I've done it. You're basing everything you do on past performance and your belief in what you can achieve. So here's the difference, and this is what's interesting. People that have high levels of self-efficacy tend to be happier, healthier, and more successful. It's mindset. And people with lower self-efficacy don't think that their efforts are going to make a difference. We've all met people like that. Even if I don't have the skill of basketball, but if someone told me to go out and practice every day, my level of self-efficacy would rise because I'm doing repetition, I'm practicing. I'm not going to give up. I have tenacity. Those are the things that feed our mind. So this is a really important word, and you have to define and kind of evaluate. Do I have high self-efficacy on the task that I'm about to take on, or do I have low self-efficacy? And then realizing what you can do to get past that. The other word, I've just been asked to write a chapter in the book about grit, and I love grit, and I love what John Maxwell says about this. There's a lot of talented people out there. I'm thinking of someone right now who's extremely talented, but they lack grit. And John Maxwell says if we could just live off of grit rather than our talents, we'd go so much further. So the person I'm thinking of is extremely talented, but they lack grit. They're not willing to do what it takes, or they don't use all of their talents because they don't see a need. And I always call that like, oh, such a potential loss of talent because they're just simply not using their grit. If we have grit, you can overcome any deficiency, any obstacle or challenge that you're faced with. And you certainly don't have to be the smartest, most talented, most poised, most resourceful person in the room. You just simply have to say, I have grit, I have tenacity. So he says, grit wins the race for giftedness any day of the week. So remember the word grit and say to yourself, I have something I want to accomplish. Do I have the grit that is going to be needed? It's not necessarily about talent every time. It really isn't. In the same token, when I thought of that person that's got an enormous amount of talent but didn't have grit, I would almost would rather be that person that has less talent but an enormous amount of grit. Because what I have seen and what I have found is that people that have grit honestly go a lot further in their careers and in life in general. I do want to talk about 3 strategies because we're going to hit obstacles, right? I love this one because these are simple and we all know these. One is to pick something you're good at and do it and then keep doing it. You'll notice I have the hashtag grit. We gain confidence through repetition and being tenacious. Also, number 2 is to look for role models and learn from them. Surround yourself with people who are going through the same experience or similar challenges. I find that really important because when you Surround yourself with like-minded people. It saves you a lot of time instead of trying to figure out clarity and find out, what can I do to get around this obstacle? If you surround yourself with like-minded people, they're going to save you a lot of time and say, well, this is what I did. You might want to try it. Support groups and blogs are great examples of that. I am always reading blogs when there's something that's on my mind about a certain topic, or I'm not in any particular support groups, but support groups are a huge plus for people that are trying to get through an obstacle or a challenge. And then finally, give yourself a pep talk. I say this all the time when I again look back at that day that I was in that hotel room. I just kept thinking, all right, you can do this. They wouldn't have asked you to do it if they didn't think you do it. Mindset plays a key role in what we take on. And I love this quote, by the way. Be careful how you're talking to yourself, because you're listening, and people talk themselves all the time out of doing great things. So again, be careful how you're talking to yourself, because you are listening. I mentioned earlier that we're going to talk about empowerment is not the pinnacle. I get asked to talk about empowerment all the time, but honestly, I don't know if our Zoom friends can see this chart, but this is what I mean about being disempowered. We get into situations where we get discouraged, where something is difficult. Maybe we're bored, maybe we're overwhelmed, we're frustrated, we're irritated, we're relieved, and then you kind of work your way up. At the very top, actually, empowerment is the third one down. I like to talk about things that are above empowerment, because empowerment is not the pinnacle. I say that all the time. What is even bigger than empowerment would be abundance, generosity, joy, love, freedom, and gratitude. When you are to the point where you can live your life based on these words, empowerment is just a natural fallout of doing these things. I wanted to share with you some research that I came across, and this really, really affected me as far as my thinking on gratitude. It's called the gratitude effect. And I love things that where there's science behind it, and I've always said numbers don't lie. The Harvard Medical School reported that people who express gratitude are more optimistic and feel better about themselves personally. And we know this has everything to do with empowerment. When you feel good about yourself, it exudes. Everyone else around you feels that empowerment. The Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence concluded that expressing gratitude completes a feeling of connection with other people. Isn't that what this is all about? Women connecting with other women. And I feel like that's huge. I feel like it's a missing part of what we do today as far as the gratitude component of connecting. Paul Zak, a professor at Claremont Graduate University, states that neuroscience shows that recognition has the largest effect on trust, especially when it's tangible, unexpected, personal, and public. Now that's big for those of us that have team members or work in an office or in a management position or leadership position. I always make sure that when I'm giving recognition, it's got to be tangible. It could be, flowers. It could be a note card. It can be something tangible that you're handing someone so they feel that connection, that gratitude. Unexpected, I always do recognition when people least expect it. Personal, which would be coming from the person that should be giving the recognition. And obviously public. Public is huge because people want to be recognized by their peers. So this was huge, and a little bit on trust. People like to do business with people that they like, know, and trust. So every time you give recognition to others, you're building that connection of trust, which is huge, right? And finally, my last two, one almost got cut off there at the bottom. UC Berkeley used Fmri scans, which is a certain kind of a brain scan, to show that people who wrote gratitude letters, or AKA thank you cards, had a better activation in the medial prefrontal cortex, that's the front of your brain, than those who did not write the letters. What does that mean? That sounds like a lot of neuroscience psychobabble, but what it means is you're activating that part of the brain that makes you feel happy, productive, successful. So people that write gratitude letters, and I have to say it's like become a lost art. I literally bought at the store recently, whenever I run out, I go and buy like a stack of thank you notes. They're sitting on my desk. As soon as I want to send out a gratitude thank you, it takes 2 seconds. Boom, done. It's a lost art. We don't thank people enough in that way. Studies by the Cicero Group, which also was published in Forbes, found that people who are on the receiving end of gratitude have a 33% increase in their innovation and a 22% increase in work results. Now that's important, again, if you have people that you're managing or leading, and they're on the receiving end of that gratitude, you've just increased their ability to innovate and to work harder because they are being recognized. I have this conversation with my husband all the time because he owns a business. He's got 30 employees, and I'm constantly asking him, what are you doing to make people feel recognized at work? It's huge, and it's such a missing part of what we're doing today. So those are the numbers, and that's the research. And finally, I want to talk a little bit about Shift Happens. This is something that I came across, and it's made a world of difference for me. It's actually a book you can get on Amazon. I'm just plugging it. I in no way benefit from this monetarily. I just like to share. I like to be the messenger when I find cool things. This is a journal called The Happy Factor. Get it on Amazon. I think it's $14.95. If you do this 30-day journaling, it's going to reduce stress, increase your optimism, apparently better sleep, expand your self-knowledge. It's a confidence booster, and for me, greater clarity. I won't get into all the details of it, but it's something you do every day, and you have to commit to journaling in the next 30 days. It's kind of like taking control of your mind. We've all heard that in 21 days you can change a habit, but in 30 days you can change your mindset, which is huge. So please, if you get a chance, it's such an inexpensive purchase, and it's just an amazing tool. And again, do it for 30 days. Now, interestingly, I did it for 30 days. I'm on my second, 6 months ago, I did it. Now I'm doing this again because our goals change, our aspirations change, things that we want to accomplish change. This will gain you so much clarity, and it just makes you feel so positive. There's a section in there where you have to write out your I am, comments, and you'll actually have a part in there where you're grateful for one person in your life. And you have to talk about why you feel grateful for that person. It's going to more than empower you. It's truly a shift in the way that we think. So check that out, purchase that for you or a friend, and do it with someone that's a friend. I would love to connect with you further on the topic of empowerment and confidence. I want to give you a little bit of my background or a way to connect with me. My email is laura@laurakleinGroup.com. My website is laurakleinGroup.com. If you go to my website, you'll have a chance to buy the book I recently co-authored, and I talk about my experiences in Desert Storm and how I went from feeling kind of empowered to feeling very empowered by the time my 5-month deployment, at the end of that deployment, and what changed for me. And then finally, check me out on LinkedIn. Please connect with me. And there's my LinkedIn address, which is basically linkedin.com/in/Laura Klein Coach. And finally, let's end with this. Empowered women empower women. And we have that responsibility. When I said I had 5 kids, I have 4 daughters. And I make it a point to always make sure that everything I say and do will empower them to live their best life. So remember, empowered women empower women. Any questions, comments, any takeaways from today? I would love to hear anybody. I don't know if we have anything on the chat. Thanks for being my big audience today. Rah, rah. We should go do